Welcome to the chapel of Robinson College here at the University of Cambridge. Today we're delighted to welcome Dr. Boris Gunjevic, who speaks about his new project embracing small lights, fireflies and grace. Boris Gunjevic is Director of Studies and Senior Tutor in Theology and Hermeneutics at Westfield House in Cambridge. He has published a number of books, including God in Pain in Versions of the Apocalypse, which he co-authored with Slavoj Žižek, and he is a senior member here at Robinson.
To be honest, like I'm almost like not like that I want to speak, because there's so many people are talking all the time, and I was like, what can I say? I mean, it's just kind of almost like, it's not that I resigned from all of this, paresia and truthful speaking in courage, but it just simply, it's like that. So many discussions, such a noise.
Can you say something about that to begin with?
Yeah.
That's going to be important for people to hear, I think.
Yeah. What do you mean? You can ask like what?
Well, just probably it's a reason why you should be heard, because there are not many people with that sense of awareness. But I think just the acknowledgement that there's so much white noise.
Yeah, I think we live in a time when people are, and including me, we are so opinionated about everything. We have opinion about everything. We are almost like a couple of years ago, we had a terror of experts that, just ask expert for something, like growing children, everything was like about experts. But today, it's just completely opposite. Nobody cares for experts, just people care for their own opinion and they want to be heard. And I think it's so much noise out there that one of the exercises we should almost like practice daily is just to be able to be in silence and listen, and not just like nod, like, oh yeah, that's nice what you say, but just simply listen and discern what's going on, because it's so many things going on at the same time.
Boris Gunjevic, a very warm welcome to Robinson College Chapel.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Simon.
One of the projects that you're working on, a long-term project, a work in progress, as you call it, is the notion of small lights. And I wonder if you could say a little bit about where this idea of small lights comes from.
Originally, it comes from Dante, from reading his Divine Comedy, Canto 28, when rich people of Florence, especially political advisors, spin doctors we would call them, they are there in the hell, in the eighth circle of hell, as the people who are speaking lies. And in Dante's world, it means that not telling the truth, it is a kind of a social sin that ruins community. So they are there in the hell, and they have sort of a small, tiny lights. They are in opposition of ordinary people in the late summer nights that they are doing harvesting. And these small lights are represented with metaphor of fireflies. So this is the sort of idea where I took this idea of small lights, but it was actually inspired by a French theorist called Georges Uberman, who wrote sort of a book which is small, tiny book.
Can you say the name again?
Georges Uberman. Okay. Uberman, yeah. And he wrote a very small book about small lights, but rather in a film and other, like a little bit in literature. I think it's a nice book, good steps in the wrong direction, I would say, but this sort of kind of give me some ideas to return to Dante. But everything starts with the Pasolini, his famous article from the 70s, where he wrote like, where are the old fireflies gone? and where are those small lights in Italian cultures gone? That's basically what he asked. And I sort of combine all three of those authors, or mostly Dante, Pasolini, and Uberman, and try to sort of reflect about the problem of small lights, what we have today.
And so by small lights, you have the image of fireflies, you have this sort of buzzing, small lights, and so on. And what is it contrasted with? What are the great lights? Are these the guys in the eighth circle of hell, of Dante's hell?
I think that there are different contrasts, especially with Dante. One of this is that what Dante is doing is he says basically that these political advisors who are in hell, like and bankers and gangsters who are there in the Florence, he is basically criticizing Florence, which is very interesting because Florence is sort of a proto-capitalistic city. They invented florin, which is like a golden coin, and they're kind of a proto-inventors of the modern banking system. So because with their false advising people, they created enormous rich. So opposite of them is Elijah, who is a Old Testament prophet, who is a good political advisor, and they are like sort of in a contrast. The second is ordinary people who are doing their harvesting and in the late summer nights, and these are the sort of another contrast. And the third, maybe even the more one, is that Odysseus, who is the one of those big characters, strong heroes, big heroes, larger than life, who is returning on Ithaca home to his Penelope after maybe 2 or 3 decades, decide once again to sail until the end of the world. And this is sort of it's a poetic invention by Dante. We never heard about that, but the idea is that Dante was depicting Odysseus as a huge hero who he dared to do something that nobody did, and he's going to the end of the world. And of course, he crashed there, and he basically he convinced his ex-friends and sailors, let's do it once again. And this is sort of ambiguous because what I sort of reflect about it is that he says, let us search for virtue, let us do good things. He started once again try to convince them and start with very noble speeches he was used to do. But I think is also maybe something kind of behind is this idea of what Plato used in some of his dialogues, idea of second sailing, when you kind of discard and reject authorities, when you're questioning and doubt everything, then it's a time for you to go to second sailing, because you just row with your hands. There is no good wind. There is nothing secure in your life. Then you have to kind of, Plato says, like, let's do, like Socrates actually says, like, let's do the second sailing. And I think idea of a second sailing, that you are embarked on the sailing with your own strength, with your own capacities and possibilities, is let me do it once again.
One equal temper of heroic hearts made weak by time and fate and all that. Yeah. So Ulysses here, Odysseus in Greek, he is the shining beacon of human endeavor, of human virtue. Yes. Is there then a relationship between these sort of great lights and what we tend to think of as omnipotence?
I think one of these omnipotence might, as you kind of hint already, is that we live in the time when like everything is possible. You just like be the best version of yourself.
Life. I'm living my best life is a phrase I hear everywhere.
Yes, and you are enough. Kind of like a kind of an Oprah. Sort of and then consequence of that you are in perpetual kind of euphoria, because it's a kind of a happiness. This is the best life you can do, and I think this is sort of shining such a huge light on sort of on big stages, and and especially with motivational speakers, I had a bad life, I was abused, I was this and that, and now I I discipline myself and get, and you know, and if you do this, you will become motivational speaker like me and get money. And you know, you have those sort of a motivation by nothingness, or almost like by kind of a pure nihilism. And then that's from one side. And the second is that this sort of a almost like obsession with the trauma, you know, that we live in a time of pandemic, which is sort of a kind of a global trauma. You know, for the first time we have the global kind of a, almost like global emotion, and it's like everything is sort of a transparent, everything is in media, and it's so much light there, so much noise that I'm not sure that we can even hear each other from this cacophony of the sounds and ideas. So I think that's sort of where light is kind of a shining all the time. But if you stay for a long time on light, first you can get blind because staring in the light that can give you some blindness. Second, it's very hot. You know, if you stay under, you know, under the light, it became very, very hot. I like this sort of a idea of Dante. When you read Dante, it's completely opposite. You know, it's going from the darkness, and there are all sorts of small lights or flickering or burning coal, candles all the time, because you have to sort of learn how to adjust to darkness and light. And even in a Plato's cave, when people leave, when they are leaving cave, you know, they come to get, they're going towards light, and then when they come to light, they're blind, you know, because it's sort of, because they were so for so long in the darkness that you have to have this time of adjustment or even exercise your perception. And I think Dante is very good, like poets like Dante, because when you read, it's not just literature or liturgy, it is a kind of a formation of perception. It is formation of attention, if you want. I think that's what I see in the small lights.
So there's a resensitization after you've been, if you're overexposed to light. I think about, I don't know, an interrogation room where you've got those lamps staring at you, and the fascism, you use the phrase fascism that does not look like fascism. These sort of big lights that glare, desensitize us to what really matters, the lights that matter.
I think so. I think that's a part of the challenge, because like in order to understand what's going on, I think it's not the question, like I think the real question is like, you know, what is contemporary? You know, people like Kierkegaard and others like Nietzsche, they will ask this, and it's not like where the big lights are point to, but just opposite. Where are the shadows? You know, where are the shadows, and how long are the shadows are projected from those lights? That's what contemporary is. Contemporary means, of course, you know, to be together in time, but it's, I think Roland Barthes asked a question like, to whom or to what we are contemporary. It's not like, oh well, this is like, it's all about us, but to what's going on that we are contemporary. And in order to be contemporary, we have to almost like redirect our way of looking or our perception into shadows that are created by these big lights, what is going on the stage all the time.
And in practical terms, are we talking about some of the abuses that are necessary to keep us in the life to which we've become accustomed? Is this the sort of the cost of our Western comfort, for instance?
What do you mean abuse? Can you just
it's the, I suppose, the nobodies, the unpersons, as George Orwell will call them, the necessary cannon fodder for our virtue. The most obvious example, you know, we like to think that we're open to the outsider, even in a place like Cambridge, we're open to the outsider, the stranger, the foreigner, and so on. But we don't know any of those people unless they come and clean our car, or clean our room, or deliver our shopping, or our meal. Our refusal to engage with the life to which these people are subjected, whilst at the same time maintaining the belief that we are good, virtuous, open people.
Yeah.
We just don't want to encounter any of those other people who
Yeah.
keep us in the life to which we've become accustomed.
I think that's the part of the challenge, because we, soon as we start to perceive ourselves as good, and virtues and everything, I mean, that's a challenge, because like evil never presented itself as evil. Look, I'm evil, like I'm like, demon or devil. He would never say this. He will always be good. The problem is that we have to sort of discern among all sorts of goods that are kind of offered to us. And I think that's the idea of small lights matters, because as much as fireflies are metaphors, but in the same times, this is like act of discreteness. Like church fathers would talk about diakrisis, to sort of go through sort of a crisis and discern the spirits, or discern what is behind that in order to see. Because the word diakrisis, it's very interesting in Greek, because it is used in as you say very well, it's used in medicine. When the doctor come after 7 days and read the symptoms, he basically do action of diakrisis and says, well, this guy is sick, he has a plague or COVID or anything. Or second ways of diakrisis is that when judge hear all of the pro and contra arguments, he says guilty or not guilty. Like, diakrisis means kind of revealing things. And I think what we need, and metaphor of small lights is that idea of discretion, of understanding, what is sort of in depth, or what is behind, what is hidden, rejected, thrown aside, and just sort of almost like exercise of paying attention on something that we don't usually do. And I think that's what it is.
So can I move you towards the Gospels then? You using the phrase diakrisis,
Mm-hmm.
or it speaks of your way through the crisis, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think you use examples from the Gospels where you're talking about people who do undergo this crisis, people who are the exhaust fumes of the imperial machines, and who, when you've undergone this sort of crisis, this darkness, is that when you then can become sensitized to small lights?
Yeah, I think first of all that if you read the Gospels, like story about Jesus' life, everything is about small things. Smallness is almost like prioritized. Like you don't have to have lots of faith or big faith. You have to have a little faith in a big God. It's you have all sorts of ideas like why small things matters. And I think when they come together, they don't do just sort of a opposite of something big. They simply decide not to participate in the game of small and big. It is almost like refusal to play the game that was already put into place. It is the act of refusal of something that was already prearranged, whether this is hierarchical, social, religious, or Giorgio Agamben used to call it destituent power, which means that when you have apparatus, when you have certain dispositives, certain way of putting things into place, you dismantle it. You kind of deactivate apparatus. And he thinks that this act of dismantling apparatus, deactivate, that you are opening it for new use, right? You just kind of you prepare it for the new way of using things. An idea is this, that what I think in the gospel is sort of lurking there, is that is it possible to use something but not to own it? Just to kind of use, like almost like you have a tool, you turn it to the weapon, or you have a weapon and turn it to the tool. You just sort of reuse what you have at hand. And I think this idea to have something at hand in the classical antiquity is very important, because you have a rule of life, proherion, at your hand, and you live according to that rule. And I think in the Gospels, like one of the stories that I really like is when the young boy came and bring loaf and fishes to Jesus, and he took a bread, he took it, bless it, break it, and give it. And the idea is that Jesus blessed something that was not enough, that was lack of something. They have a couple of breads, just like, and he break it, which means that blessing is in the breaking, that you have to be sort of a broken in order to multiply and then give it. It's almost like this process of when you are breaked or you're just like, crumbling or whatever, then this process, the blessing is able to kind of almost dwell among you, and then you multiply, you give gifts, and then it's even when you give, the text says that even kind of the 12 bread left, which is kind of interesting, that there was a 12 disciples, so that was like for all of them that was there. So idea that something that is small and broken, fragmentized, if you want, it is the sort of a platform for blessing, for multiplication.
So we become alert to our own disintegration, our own fragmentation. And when we are, the lights that matter, those fragments of light, these sort of micro slithers of heaven's light, you discover that actually, if there is a big God, then this notion of greatness is reconceived into these small lights. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that like when this God became human, I think this is such a way that big light becomes small light in order that we can be shined by this small light. And in idea of Good Samaritan, for example, when Good Samaritan turned toward the person who is beaten, naked, wounded, in this moment of turning, the small light's shining. And it's almost like you have this flickering of incarnation there, that one who's supposed to be enemy choose someone who will be my neighbor. And I think this is original contribution to Christian, of Christianity, according to even Illich, that for the first time, we, as Good Samaritans, as we like to see ourselves, that's problematic, of course, but we choose who is my neighbor, who is the closest, my kin, not because it's my tribe, my nation, my religious affiliation, my political class, gender, whatever you call it, but the person who is in need is helped by the person who chooses to help him. And I think this is sort of this moment of turning, it's almost shining of this small light.
Yeah, that's one of the questions I wanted to ask is, when you picture fireflies, for instance, you don't picture a small light, a small light, a small light. You picture a buzzing, some kind of interrelatedness, a whole load of interaction.
Yes.
At play. Can you say a little more about that? This is not individual.
No.
All doing their own thing. There's something communal going on here.
There is something very charming about fireflies. And if I'm not old enough, I will tattoo my, firefly here, or, one of those kind of a cool thing what people are doing today, is that actually nobody knows how fireflies coming together. Scientists try to kind of resolve conundrum because one starts shining and then another attract another and third and fourth, and they become like swarm, and they're like shining together, and then the light is decreasing. So it's almost like they come and go, and if you can trust scholars, they say that this is the love call, that they are shining because they are calling the partners to sort of come together. Second is less romantic. It is the self defense mechanism, because they are buzzing and they are kind of try to sort of inform predators not to attack them. But I think when they come together, it means that this is a collective without general and without visible hierarchy, but it goes through different social relations. They are not based on the pure concept of power. In that sense, it's a metaphor, right? but they have their own sort of internal signals of coming together and shining light and be together. And so in that sense, it's not just individual.
Some people will say that when it comes to talking about alternative structures, alternative social structures, that sooner or later there is no escape from hierarchies. Can you say a little about that?
I think this is, especially today, it's a big topic. It's not like the way it's first we have to sort of understand what word hierarchy means. And in classical translation, there are all sorts of, it's a sacred power. And there is the one, and what is power then? That's the, and we almost sort of learn how to not to sort of have friendly terms with power. Michel Foucault defined power that this is a relation between two forces. And I think is that if you give that concept of power, if you give sort of a sacerdotal or holy or kind of a, if you want, ecclesial form, it turns to its worst. Even Illich use a phrase which is sort of a very nice to put it. He says corruptio optima pessima, which means corruption of the best become worse. Like grace, for example, in the Middle Ages, or festivity of Christianity, the best part of Christianity in the gospel became institutionalized and distributed through the sort of a hierarchy and power, and it became basically worse, right? When you institutionalize kindness, goodness, and something what is best, charity, love, it becomes its own parody. So I think that idea of having hierarchical structure is something that it should be questioned all the time. We are in the hierarchies, and we have it, like even what you can say about biology. You have like plants, you have animals and humans, and you have sort of you can immediately say this, but should we treat humans kind of differently, or is there any other models? I think that we should look for it, and I think that perhaps people like Giorgio Agamben are onto something, that there is something into this, what he called destituent power. There is something in this deactivation of apparatus. There is something that hierarchy is not the purpose for itself, to keep itself going. I think that's what it is, and especially not it's sort of a divine power, put it in from the place that God created something like this. This is, I think, a little bit questionable. Of course, we should discuss about it. That's.
Can I ask you a final question then?
Yes, please.
Why do small lights or fireflies matter?
I think I partially tried to respond to this, but I think it matters because it reminds us that we are all human beings, that small things matters, that and it's a question of measure, that we have to sort of find proportionality in the things what we are doing. And it's sort of it is poetic moment of the thought that you are able to see and dare to see things differently. And it also is a ability to inhabit the world of people around us with respect and love and charity, and not to sort of be patronizing them, just and allow them to speak their own voice, not to talk in their names. I think really there is so much dishonesty when I talk in the name of other people, like, in the name of Black or poor or Eastern Europeans or whoever. Like, you just simply, maybe just idea of small lights is that that we are in this together, and then maybe we can be able to listen and learn from each other in a way that you are capable to articulate your own position. And as I say, I think that small lights matters because it's about changing of perception, the way how we see, paying attention to details. And I can finish, if you allow me, if I have time, with a story. Is it okay?
Fire away.
Okay. And it is about this, perhaps maybe answer that can be sort of a fit. Miyamoto Musashi was the best master of the sword in Japan of all times. While he was very, very young, he started practicing. So while he was like 12, 13, 14, he already won some duels. And when he was 90 or 20, there was one of his opponents that people say, Musashi will never pass him. So they were waiting, the whole Japan was waiting for this Musashi, his opponent, huge duel. And his opponent came once in a local tavern, and he said to a bartender, he says, I heard that in this village there is an old sword master, that he was the best and undefeated samurai in whole Japan. Please go and fetch him. I would like to invite him for duel. And bartender said, he's old, he's doing gardening with his wife, he's just reading and meditating, so he does not do fencing anymore. There is no sword fighting anymore. And he said, just go there and call him back. And if he does not come, I will go upstairs and I will cut him into pieces. And after like 1 hour, bartender came and bring opponent rose. And opponent says, old man is gone. There is no point even to kill him. He's idiot. He's just insane and mad. He's sclerotic. And he throw rose. 2 days later, Musashi came and he said, he repeated the same story. I heard there is a famous old man of sword in your village. I would like to defeat him. Bartender said, oh, that's very interesting you say this, because 2 days ago, there was a guy kind of a little bit older than you. He asked for the same. And Musashi says, yeah, and? An old samurai sent him a rose. And Musashi says, can I get the rose? He says, oh yeah, it's here. And he checked the rose and looked at the rose and he said, my worst enemy saved my life today. What is the moral of the story? Musashi saw the way how old man cut rose, which he realized that old man is still best swordman in the whole Japan. Paying attention to details. I think this is about small lights. I think, this sort of a moment of attention that Musashi was able to see the rose that his opponent scorned. He said, like, the guy is crazy. I don't want to even fight him. Musashi pay attention to detail. And attention is a kind of funny word because it means to care or to wait in attention. And I think this is sort of what small lights are for me.
Boris Gunjevic, thank you very much.
You're welcome.